the last lesson for volume is what we're talking about today, and there's one figure that we haven't discussed yet, and that's spheres. So recall that to find the surface area of a sphere, we used the formula 4 pi r squared. So we only needed the radius. Remember, the net of a sphere was kind of like 4 circles, so pi r squared is a circle. We multiplied by 4, that's kind of where it came from. Now the volume of a sphere, so to figure out how much space a sphere occupies, you use a formula that's, it's not too different from surface area. You only need the radius, but it does look a little different. So the formula is 4/3 pi r cubed. This formula, it's derived from cones, and that's kind of where the fraction comes from. Cones were 1/3 pi r squared h. Sphere is 4/3. If you're interested in knowing kind of where this comes from, I can show you in class. And it's pretty complicated, but you guys will just have to know how to use the formula, not necessarily where it comes from. So we've got 3 examples here. And like I said, you only need the radius. So the first example is very straightforward. They just want you to find the volume, and they want you to write it 2 ways, in terms of pi and rounded. So they give you the radius. This couldn't be any easier. So use my formula, 4/3 pi, radius is 6 cubed. All right, so in terms of pi, we already know you don't put the pi in your calculator. So I'd do 4/3 times 6. To get to the 3rd power, you press the caret button, which is right there. If you don't know where the caret button is on your calculator, ask me in class and I will show you. Okay, so in terms of pi, this would be 288 pi meters cubed. If I want to round that to the nearest 10th, I'm going to multiply by pi in my calculator, and it'd be 904.8 meters cubed. Now, honestly, that problem is probably a little too easy. That's something that someone in middle school geometry could do. All I did was put it in my calculator. Speaking of calculator, just like with the 1/3 thing from pyramids and cones, if you don't have the fraction button, your calculator's different, you could do 6 cubed, so get that number. Then you could multiply it by 4 and divide by 3. That's the same thing as multiplying by 4/3. So again, if you need help plugging that in your calculator, you've got to ask me in class tomorrow. All right, so like I said, that's a little bit too straightforward. It's more examples like 2 and 3 that you could be asked on an exam. This brings it up to high school level. So number 2 says, this picture is the picture of an empty pill capsule. A pharmacist wants to fill the capsule with medicine. So they need to know, maybe the manufacturing company needs to know how much medicine will fit inside this capsule. Notice that it never says find the volume, all right? And it's not going to say that probably on the exam. You're going to need to know that the amount of space taken up on the inside, like how much medicine will fit. You need to know that, oh, that means volume, okay? How much can fit inside of a figure. So kind of be aware of that. It might not be super straightforward. This is a composite figure. It's 2 shapes in 1. So if I kind of drew in the 3-dimensional part over here, in the middle of the pill capsule, you have a cylinder. So I always, again, break it up when I've got 2 shapes in 1. If you ignore the cylinder, on either end, if you took the cylinder out and pushed the ends together, it would be a full sphere. You've got a hemisphere on either end of the little pill capsule. So I'm going to find the volume of the cylinder, volume of the sphere, and then combine them. Okay, it's a full cylinder, so I don't have to think about, and this is easier than surface area, because I don't have to think about what sides I can see on the cylinder. I see a full cylinder, so I'm going to find the full volume, which you remember that formula was pi r squared h. So the radius, let's see, this is the diameter, 8.4, so cut that in half, and that'd be 4.2. and the height of the cylinder is this 15.2. I'm going to leave the answer in terms of pi until the very end. So that way my answer is as accurate as possible. So let's do 4.2 squared times 15.2. So 268.128 pi. That's the cylinder's volume. For the sphere, so it's a full sphere, so I'm going to use the full volume formula. And I know the radius is 4.2 already. Okay, so there's my formula. And let's see, same thing. I'm going to wait to plug in pi until the very end. So 4.2 to the third would be 98.784 pi. Once I've got the two numbers, I'm just going to add them together. So I'm going to take that decimal and multiply it by pi and add it to 268.128 pi. So my answer, rounded to the nearest tenth, is 1,152.7 millimeters cubed. And think about it, if you actually were working for this manufacturing company to figure out how much medicine to fill inside each capsule, you would want the perfect answer. If you round the cylinder and you round the sphere and then give me your answer, it's going to be further off from the actual amount of medicine that can fit. So try to be accurate when you can. Number 3. Oh, this really kicks it up to our level here. They tell me that the volume of a sphere is 2,304 pi. I want to find, so my goal is to find the surface area of the sphere. Okay, so remind yourself, surface area is 4 pi r squared. That's my goal, so I need the radius. Well, I'm going to have to use the first part of this to come up with the radius. And they gave me the volume, so remember your formula, 4/3 pi r cubed. Now, I don't know the radius, but I do know the volume, so let's stick that in there for V. And we need to solve this for R here. So what I do, and I'm just going to divide by pi on both sides, because that will get rid of the pi on either side. So that's kind of nice. It's kind of just like a distracting piece. So it's just 2,304 equals 4/3 r cubed. Now, if you've got a calculator like mine, it's probably easiest to just divide by 4/3. Realize you could multiply by the reciprocal, 3/4, and that'd be the same thing. You could multiply by 3 and then divide by 4. But again, if you have a calculator like mine, you can just use the fraction button and divide by 4/3. And it'll kind of give you a nice little answer here. So it's 1728 equals r cubed. Now, you may not remember this from Algebra 1, but you need to figure out the radius. So what to the third power equals 1728? Instead of doing square root, you do what's called cubed root. Okay, so in your calculator, it's different from square root, okay, so you don't press that. If you look above the caret button, there's a square root symbol with an X out front. So if you press second and then that's going to get that button. Before you press that, though, there's a 3 out front of our square root, so I need to press 3, then second caret, and there's that little symbol, and then press 1728, and they give me 12. So that's telling me, okay, well 12 times 12 times 12 is 1728. That's what cubed root means. All right, so that's a little new to us, but I have the radius now, so I can come plug that into my surface area formula. and they want me to leave my answer in terms of pi, so I'm just going to do 4 times 12 squared, and say my answer is 576 pi units squared, since it was surface area.